am the shadow on the moon at night, filling your dreams to the brim with fright.
It has been very well known in my family that my great aunt's house in New York City is haunted. My uncle says that she has accidentally created a poltergeist, and that it looks just like her. Story. My uncle was a very young child, and he was sleeping in a bedroom on the second floor. He had woken up in the middle of the night, and he remembered that he must have woken up because he was thirsty. The room was dark, as was the hallway that passed his bedroom door, which at the time was open, so that he can call out to his aunt if he needed anything. As he laid there and he called out, "Aunt Jane! Aunt Jane!" But no answer. It was at this time that he noticed his aunt walk past his bedroom door. She had a long white nightgown, and her skin seemed to glow snow white and pale, like it almost glowed in the moonlight. But he said she wasn't really walking. Her head did not move, and she was just walking. It was more like she was floating. Once she passed his bedroom door, he called out again, "Aunt Jane! Aunt Jane, can I have a glass of water?" It was silent. He had no idea if she heard him. Moments later, he was watching his bedroom door to see if she would come inside. Fingers crept around the door at the top right edge of the doorframe, and he said, "Aunt Jane?" It was strange because the ceilings are so tall that if someone tried to peek inside their bedroom at that height, they would have had to be in at least 7 feet or 7'5". This is when he felt maybe this wasn't his Aunt Jane. Paralyzed in fear, he watched as eyes and then his face peek out from the top of the doorframe. The face had no eyes, it was only pits from where the eyes should have been. Its face seemed sunken and dead. This thing that looked like an evil mirror image of his aunt stared right at him, and it said nothing. Dread set in, and my uncle felt like he had done something very bad. He climbed underneath his blanket, waiting for it to go away. When he lowered the blanket from his eyes, nothing was there. He forgot about the water, and he just went back to sleep.
I've been debating with myself for months whether I should post this or not, and today I finally feel like it's time. It's long, but please read it. I need to tell people about this, and I need someone that knows about this to talk to. I lived in a farm about 4 years ago. From the moment we moved there, I could tell there was something wrong. I felt uneasy in there, as if there was something constantly spying on me. A little detail about the place and situation. We didn't technically own the place. It was borrowed from a woman that was trying to sell it. Call it a demo. So we didn't have access to the house and slept in the wooden storage house. The farm itself was like this. There was a barbed wire gate that you manually had to move in entrance. And in front of it there was an open, empty field with one of those outside washrooms to the right. Passing by it there was a small group of trees, and then the place where we slept. Passing that was the actual house to the left, and then the forest. In the forest entrance, there was a tree with a ripped plastic bag tied to its branches, meaning the bag was tied while it was still small. People used to do that to mark something. And right in front of it, there was a mound. Someone buried something in there. I moved there with 4 dogs, plus the dog that already lived there that we took care of. Our routine was this. Wake up at 5 a.m. to go to the city so I could go to school and my parents could go to work. The first night we stayed there, I noticed my room was the only one in the entire house that didn't have a lock. I couldn't sleep because of the weird feeling I had. I stayed up all night and slept on my way to school. Then, things got weirder. The door started opening at night. I had dismissed it as the wind. Cliché, I know, but it became more frequent and more violent. Then still, at the first week I saw it, it was a black humanoid figure with a white face. It was like the white face had empty eye sockets, and instead of a mouth, just an empty cavity for a face. It stood on my door entrance, staring at me. I decided I would not sleep while I lived there. I couldn't bring myself to move or do anything, so I just kept staring at it and trying to convince myself that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Then some nights later, it became impossible to pretend because it started moving and doing things. It entered my room, tapped on the window. It was a metal window that was right beside my bed, slightly moved things, and kept being a general creep. Whenever I flashed light on it, it would disappear, but the eerie feeling kept there. I started keeping a flashlight in my room and playing music to keep myself awake and calm. Eventually, I started falling asleep in some days, and in those days, I woke up with headaches and the feeling that my eyes had been pushed into my skull. I woke up with pain. Eventually, my parents got security cameras because while we were in the city, some people entered the place to go fishing. There was a shortcut to the neighboring farm's lake through our forest. This is important because of the next part. Then one day my aunt went to visit. She had some weird superstitions, and she said the place had gold buried in it for some effing reason. She went to the forest and saw a mound under the marked tree I had talked about before. She decided it was a good idea to unbury it, and so we did. Bad idea. I was digging it. I need to describe what happened now very well to pass the feeling, so bear with me. There was a certain feel of digging dirt that differs from rocks or mud or clay. I learned this that day as I dug that hole. Then, after going through a small layer of fragmented rocks, I hit something soft and resistant that felt like leather. I hit it harder and pushed through it. Immediately after it, there was something hard with a complex and detailed shape. I tried to break through since my aunt insisted it was a protection of the gold. My parents were just whipping me into helping. But it was no use. And it occupied most of the area of the hole, so we couldn't dig around it. It was like a hole was made specifically to bury it. My aunt then said she would cover the hole. She didn't cover it, and we went home. That night was hell. There was no tapping on the windows. There was a strong banging. The thing kept entering my room non-stop, and even the flashlight was not working. I had to stay awake feeling everything pressuring me. My door wouldn't close. Thing would make noise, and the thing would be there, staring at me. Now the part that makes the security cameras important. They stopped working the moment it started. There were 4 cameras, one pointing to the front of the house, one pointing to the washroom, one to the back that showed my window, and one pointed to the forest. That morning, I went to check the camera footage, and all the cameras had stopped working except for one being pointed at the forest. There was only static for the other 3, and that one had just a small blur. After that night, it never appeared again. I still couldn't sleep because of fear, but it never actually showed up, and things got calmer. We moved out sometime after that. I keep thinking about it even now, 4 years later. It was too real, and there were things that were noticed by other people too. I especially keep thinking about the thing that we hit while digging, and how that night was the worst. I keep asking myself if we found a body, or some haunted thing that was hidden.
I live in a haunted house. It was a new house. My parents actually started building it when my big sister was a baby. So by the time I was born, they were already living there. So there was no weird past or anything out of the ordinary. Fast forward a few years. We were in our teens. My sis was 17 and I was 14. And we started hearing weird noises. Like steps in the stairs, going up or down. My sister's stuffed animals would just show up, as if thrown out of the shelves. And then things started to escalate. We were having dinner one time, and this big clock that was hanging in the wall just flew across the kitchen. My mum said, "Oh, I bet the nail just fell off from the wall." But the nail was right there in its place. When we checked the clock, it looked like it had been ripped from the nail in the wall. My dog would start to bark out of the blue, like she would stare at the wall and just start growling. It was really scary when she'd be looking at the sofa and go crazy, as if something was sitting right there. These type of things went on for a few years, and then we started seeing weird things. I would often see a small kid. There was no kid in my house, just Dad, Mum, Sis and me, peeking through the curtains in the window next to the front door. I'd run inside to discover that, well, there was no one there. This is when it gets freaky. One time, I was in my dad's office. I needed the PC, doing some homework late at night. It was around midnight and I kept hearing noise behind me. Of course, I thought my sister was just doing homework as well. I went to check on her and she was sleeping, so I just kept working. It was about 1 o'clock, and I feel someone standing right behind me. I really don't want to look back, so I try to continue. And then I hear this little girl's voice whispering in my fucking ear. That really scared the shit out of me. Needless to say, I dropped everything and ran to my room. My mum and my aunt, who used to visit often, would see a young man, probably around my age. There was a hall between my parents' room and mine. That was the place where they'd see him most of the time. I remember this one time very clearly. I could hear my mum walking out of her room. When she was about halfway to my room, she said, "Hey kiddo," and kept on walking. When she went through my door, I could see the confused look on her face while I was laying in bed watching TV. And she said, "What are you doing here?" "You just walked past me." So obviously I was like, "Nope, must have been the other guy." Then there was this older man. That one was a shadowy figure we would see roaming the kitchen. And my mum, aunt, sis and me. Usually see him walking through the kitchen and then going behind the kitchen door. The thing is, when it was open, this door would be like 1 inch away from the wall, so there is no way a person could fit in there. I had a friend visit me once. Never told her about the ghosts. She was in the kitchen while I went to my room to get CDs or something. Took me a while to go back. By the time I go back to the kitchen, she asked, "Hey, do you have ghosts in your house?" I was like, "What?" Then she told me. First I heard a little kid coming down the stairs. And then I heard someone, I thought it was you, jump down the stairs. Then I heard a slow-paced walking coming down the stairs. I thought it was your dad. There was nobody but us in the house when this all happened. Turns out my friend is really sensitive to the whole ghosts thing. We had new neighbours move in while this was happening. She was a divorced mum with 3 kids. The older kids were around my age. The little girl was around 3. So the mum and my mum became friends. My mum would babysit the little one every now and then. So, this one time, I come home, and my mum and the girl are in the living room. We're watching TV and playing, and something caught the girl's attention. She's looking at something behind me. I turn and see nothing. I could see the terrified look on her eyes as she follows something moving through the wall. She crawls behind me and points to a corner up high in the ceiling, covers her eyes and says, "Please make that go away." I looked at my mum, grabbed the kid and ran like crazy. We returned when Dad came back home. Sometime after that we sold the house, actually for non-ghosts related reasons. Hope you enjoyed my haunted house experience. Sorry if it was too long.
In 2017, me and my girlfriend moved into a tiny, kind of crappy house in our college town. The house was made by a couple of students a few years prior, so the architecture was a bit sloppy. For example, the roof was flat. Take note of this, it will be important later. However, the house was really cheap and close to campus, so it seemed like a total steal. The first couple of months living there, nothing out of the ordinary happened, but it wasn't too long before we started experiencing strange, paranormal activities. The first odd occurrence was with our smoke detectors. Our smoke detectors would go off constantly. It was strange because they would go off even if there wasn't smoke in the house, from our bad cooking, for example. We thought that maybe it was because of old batteries, but no matter how many times we changed them, it never made a difference. It got to the point they were going off 3 to 5 times a day, and at that, we just broke down and took the batteries out of all of them. Note, there were 6 detectors in total. However, even without batteries, the smoke detectors were still going off. So out of desperation, we turned off the entire smoke detector circuit to the house. It was at this point when things started getting really out of control. The back room / storage room in the house always had a really eerie feeling, like someone was watching or standing just behind you, staring down at you. Thankfully, me and my girlfriend's bedroom was the furthest room in the house from the storage area, so I avoided it like the plague. Anyways, one night around 3 a.m., the smoke detector in our bedroom goes off. However, it's not its usual repetitive beeping. It's a single, long beep. It sounded like when someone was holding its test button on the detector. Frustrated, my girlfriend grabs a chair from the dining room and stands on it to reach the detector, but moments after she touches it, the beep stops. We both groan in irritation as she goes to put the chair back, but before she makes it to the dining room, the smoke detector down the hall from our room makes the same continuous beep. Just like before, she stands on the chair to reach the detector, but right before grabbing it, the detector stops. Our smoke detectors continued this pattern all the way back to the creepy storage room. This happened 2 more times that night. It was as if whatever was messing with us was trying to lead us to its room. This would happen to us at least once or twice for the next 1.5 years we lived there. Shortly after the encounters with the smoke detectors, the house became absolutely infested with bugs. There was no history of bug issues when we bought the house, and it started almost immediately after our first experience with the smoke detectors. Bugs would pour out of light fixtures, small cracks in the walls and counters, and of course, the smoke detectors. Literally 1 minute, everything would be fine. Then the next, winged insects or ants would pour out of the walls. We had multiple exterminators come, but less than a week after treating the house, the bugs would come back just as bad as before. It made us miserable, and I've never seen an infestation to that extreme. It was unnatural. After these occurrences, we began feeling really terrified and depressed. We both hated being home, but there was no other place for us to go. This was when the footsteps started. Remember how I said our roof was flat? At least a few times a week, we would hear large, heavy, possibly hoof-like footsteps on the roof. We tried writing it off as being animals, so whenever we heard the steps, we would run outside to see if we could spot the animal in question. But there was never anything there. The steps were very far apart from one another. Whatever was walking on our roof would start from the creepy storage room and in maybe 3 or 4 steps, walk to our bedroom. The steps were so loud it sounded like whatever was haunting us was either very big or stomping to get our attention. Now began the phantom sounds. We had large metal bowls that we used daily for cooking, so when we were done, we would wash them and set them on the counter to dry. The first time it happened, me and my girlfriend were sitting on the couch in the living room. The kitchen was right next to the living room, but there was an island that blocked our view to the sink area. Anyways, on this night, we were startled by the sound of our multiple metal bowls being thrown off the counter. At this time, we didn't have pets, so we assumed the worst and thought someone might be breaking into the house. We both shut up and ran over to face our worst fear. But not only was no one in the house, nothing in the kitchen had been moved. The bowls were still on the counter, just where we left them. This was the most common paranormal occurrence in the house, and it happened at least 5 to 10 times a day at all hours. After a while, we were so sick and tired of these disturbances, we stopped using our metal bowls. Or if we did use them, we would hand dry them and put them away right after use. This didn't make the spirit very happy. So next, we started hearing what sounded like our ceramic plates being thrown to the ground, and our kitchen cabinets slamming over and over again. Do you know those types of cabinet hinges that close slowly? Yeah, that's what we had. So to slam the cabinets like that, they would have to have been closed with excessive force. The next phase in our haunting was sightings and photographs. The phone I had at the time had one of those automatic face tracking features, meaning you would take pics on my phone. Yellow boxes would appear around the person's face to focus on them. One night I was taking a picture in me and my girlfriend's bedroom when a yellow face tracker square appeared at the foot of our bed, way above our bed. If that was a person, they would have had to be at least 7 feet tall. At the time, we did have posters on our bedroom walls, so while focusing on the face tracker square, I circled the room to confirm that the tracker wasn't just focusing on one of the posters on accident. To my dismay, no matter where I was in the room or from what angle, the square stayed in the exact same place. Oh yeah, even better, I was home alone for a few nights. I don't think I've ever experienced such sheer terror as I did when I went to sleep that night. After this first encounter, having cameras track faces in our pictures became a constant occurrence all throughout the house. The final phase of our haunting before getting the heck out of there was physical encounters. This happened more often to my girlfriend than me, but something would occasionally grab and pull our hair, especially when we were walking through the living room. But the most terrifying experience goes to our friend Jamie. She came to visit us for a few nights, and while she was there, she would sleep on our couch. She was aware of all the paranormal encounters in the house, and she had seen most of them firsthand, but nothing compared to what was about to happen. It was around 3 a.m. when she woke up with an eerie, uncomfortable feeling. All of a sudden, she experienced what felt like someone or something stepping up onto the couch. It stepped both its feet up on one other side of her body. Starting from her feet, it slowly walked up the length of her body until it felt like 2 feet on the other side of her head. She said she felt an intense, malicious energy staring down at her, but she was too terrified to open her eyes. Meanwhile, the cabinets in the kitchen began to slam over and over again. For the next few hours, she pretended to sleep, all while this presence still stood over her. She told me she's not exactly sure when it went away, because she eventually became so exhausted, she fell asleep. Not too long after this experience, we were finally able to sell the house and get the heck out of there. We lost tons of money because we sold the house for way less than we originally paid. I can't help but feel bad for the person who bought the house, but it's been almost 3 years and she's still living there. I think the takeaway from this story is, if a house is priced too good to be true, then it is. Thanks for listening.
I'm posting this because I just read a comment from someone who explained a very similar experience that happened to them. We bought our house a few years ago. It was built in the 70s and an elderly couple lived here for many years. Before that, I can't find any information, but there's a small family graveyard in our backyard with 5 graves dating back to the 1800s. Our house is a single family ranch and the experiences have all happened on the left side of the house, which we refer to as the bad side. The kids' playroom is on that side along with the laundry room, so we use the right side more often. The first experience was from my husband. He fell asleep while getting my stepdaughter to bed and woke up feeling like he was being watched. He said he saw a dark mist near her closet on the ceiling that evaporated. The door had closed on its own multiple times in that room with no problem that we could find, but it wasn't something that immediately freaked us out. One day while the kids were playing outside, I heard my daughter call out "Mommy" from the bad side of the house. I answered back to her a few times and finally walked over there. Once I got into the room it sounded like she was calling me from, I was able to see her and my stepkids out the window playing at the little graveyard, which is too far down the yard to hear her from. I opened the window and asked her what she was calling me for and she looked confused. She said she wasn't calling me. On 2 separate occasions my husband was mimicked. One of the times I was folding laundry and I distinctly heard him clear his throat from the basement directly below me. The kids were at school and he was at the store. I was completely alone and freaked the hell out. Another time I was sitting reading my Kindle in the living room when I heard my husband clear his throat and cough loudly. It came from the basement, but it sounded like it came from the bad side of the house, and again, I was alone. Nothing has happened here for a few months, but I occasionally get those irrational fears of the basement out of nowhere. Early in the morning I went to start my car from work, and I had to pass by the open basement door to get outside. We keep it open so the cats can get to the litter box. I felt the most dreadful feeling, enough for me to say a quick "oh shit" and hurry past as quickly as I could. Around Halloween, I took this picture of the decorations in the front, and my sister-in-law pointed out a creepy reflection near me. Anybody else have any experiences with a mimic?
So this is my experience living in a very active house about 5 years ago. Sorry for the long post, there were many creepy occurrences there. Just after graduation, my family moved into a house previously owned by my great-grandmother. There were 5 of us at first, my parents and I, my friend Kay, and my boyfriend, now husband, who had moved in due to not wanting to move out of state with his family. The house had an odd layout, as it had been a mobile home that had had an add-on in the front, living room, and the back, master bedroom. Boyfriend had a room on one end of the house, Kay and I shared a room on the other end, the kitchen was in the middle. To get to the main bathroom, you would have to go through the room that Kay and I shared. It started with little things, weird feelings, moved objects, the sound of furniture being dragged and moved, most notably the bathroom door. We started keeping it shut at night, otherwise it would open and close on its own. It did this all the time, day or night. We checked for drafts and anything that could cause it and found nothing. We began to notice that anytime it started to move, if we got irritated and told it to stop, the door would immediately cease to move. One night, we hadn't been in bed long when Kay got up to use the bathroom. I heard her leave the bathroom without closing the door, and I told her to close it because it bothered me. I heard the long creak of the door as it slowly shut, but it didn't quite click into place. I irritably told her to shut it all the way when she responded, "That wasn't me," in a horrified tone from the opposite corner of the room. I turned the light on and the door was completely shut, just not clicked into the frame. I ripped the door open and nothing was there. We were completely freaked out. I slammed the door and told her that is why I keep the door shut. There was also the knocking. We had 3 doors on the house leading outside. Pretty frequently, we would hear 3 knocks on any of the doors. I always look out the window before opening the door if we're not expecting any guests because you never know who might be there. So I would check the window and nobody would be there. I was once standing in front of the back door when this happened, and I could clearly see through the window on the door that nobody was there, but the door was shaking as it was hit. My boyfriend started having vivid nightmares of something trying to drag him from his bed. Later, my mother's friend was over with her toddler, and he was exploring like a normal kid his age. He stopped in the doorway to my boyfriend's room and stared for a while. He then came back and started saying "ghost" and pointing at my boyfriend's room. Nobody had mentioned anything remotely related to a ghost or scary story, and this was nowhere near Halloween either. We tried to brush it off, but he was insistent. We tried to ask for details, but he would only say "go see" and "ghost." I followed him back to the room, and he pointed at the small game closet and insisted "ghost, go see." I opened the door for him, and nothing was there, but he insisted there was a ghost. The worst night we spent in the house was when we had been in bed for about 45 minutes, when suddenly something slammed into the bed with enough force to shake the whole mattress. My bed frame didn't fit in the small room, so the mattress was on the box spring on the floor. Both Kay and I felt it. We turned the light on, and there was nothing, so we got as far from the edges of the bed as possible and tried to sleep. Something grabbed Kay's foot and yanked her blanket away. Once again, the light revealed nothing, and we were terrified. Something slammed into the wall next to the other side of the bed. These things continued into the night, and we ended up sleeping in the living room with my dad staying with us. My parents eventually moved out after a few months into the house they were working on and left us the hell house. Kay and I moved into the master room and made our old room the area where we kept our 2 new puppy kennels. On 3 occasions, my 8-month-old Pit would walk into that room, throw himself on the floor with all his hair standing on end, and scream and growl while fixated on the upper corner of the room. When he would do this, I would have to physically drag him from the room and shut the door to calm him. The other dog would somehow get out of a locked kennel when he was left in there alone, and the kennel would still be locked and secure. We still have no idea how he did it. Kay and my mother started hearing voices when they were alone, and the uncomfortable feeling got worse. One night, something started clawing at our bedroom door, and we were so freaked out by it that I called my boyfriend to come look at the door from the other side because I was too scared to unlock it and open it. The house got 5 feet of water in it during Hurricane Harvey, and we tore it down and moved. I never felt upset over losing the house. I was just relieved to be rid of it and hoped that the flood took whatever was there with it. We did attempt to catch something on video one night. We set up a new video camera with a full battery in our room before bed and left the bedroom light on because the camera didn't do night vision. When I checked it in the morning, there was only about half an hour of video before the camera apparently died. I didn't think much of it at the time, but later on, I realized that something must have drained the battery.
Oath is a little village near Canterbury and Surrey, out on the old marshes that were once the Watson Channel. A few years ago in 2014, my landscaping company were called to a job in a beautiful house there. The house was a converted barn that had been bought by the new owners who wanted some work to be done before moving in, as so often is the case. So the first step was to visit the property and take a look to come up with a price for the job. There was a great deal of land surrounding the property, with extensive gardens that had fallen into a state of disrepair. After visiting the property, I returned saying that the place gave me the creeps, and although it was empty and isolated several hundred yards from the next dwelling, it felt like I was being watched. Obviously, everyone laughed at me. I priced the job, which was a big one, and would need us to be on site for about 5 days, and I forgot about the whole thing. As it turned out, we were given the contract for the garden clearance and various tree works, and we were booked in there for a few weeks' time. When we arrived on site, there was a crew of builders already there who were working inside the house and living there for a couple of weeks while they carried out renovations. When we arrived, we said our hellos, and John asked what they thought of the house. The reply was, "It's a lovely place, but haunted to shit." We asked why they thought that, and they told us that all night they could hear banging coming from empty rooms. Their tools were being moved around, they heard whispering, and one had even received a phone call from a distant voice that couldn't be understood, from the number 000000000. He showed us the call record to prove it on his mobile phone. Interested, but not entirely convinced, we got on with our work. Joe told us that the back courtyard garden gave him the willies, but apart from that, day one was uneventful. On day two, it was quiet in the morning. Then in the afternoon, I went inside for a coffee. While I was there was knocking sounds coming from one of the back rooms. Nobody was in there, but it could well have been someone in one of the garden areas knocking against the wooden walls from outside while doing some job or another. But there was a sound like wallpaper being unrolled, or a poster falling off a wall, something like that. It came from the hall, then out of the hall, a shadow shot through the kitchen and out the front door. I was alone in the house at the time, and after looking at every angle, the only way the shadow could have been cast was by the kitchen lights in the middle of the room, but there was nothing to cast it. I was starting to become a believer. On day 3, Paul, one of the builders, was having an argument with somebody on the phone, when he hung up and said, "I can't believe that. The driver from the skip company says he won't come up here to pick up the skip unless we can promise there's someone on site to meet him, because he reckons he saw something here when he dropped off the skip, and it's definitely haunted." When he did arrive, he said that when he dropped off the skip the first time, he knew the place was empty, but he saw someone moving around in there. And while he was unloading the skip, the radio in his lorry came on loud, with a load of static. Day 4 was quiet, apart from the knocking and banging which we all got used to by then, even though it was louder than before, and definitely not one of us messing about. On day 5, a guy turned up to put in a new TV aerial that involved some wiring to be fitted in the back room where most of the noises came from. A few hours in, he was having a coffee with everyone else in the kitchen, and he said he'd be glad when he was done, because that room was creeping him out. He said that he was sure he kept hearing someone walking around in there, but there was no one inside the house, let alone in that room. The final thing that happened while we were working there was that another contractor turned up. The final thing that happened when we were working there was that another contractor turned up to do some light fittings and parked outside the house. While he was in there, his van radio came on loud with a load of static, just like the skip driver had said happened when he was there before. A few weeks after we'd been there, the new owners had moved in, and John and I went over to visit them and settle up the bill one evening after work. John was curious and asked the owner if he enjoyed living there. He obviously read between the lines a bit. Maybe he'd already been asked about the place by another one of the contractors, and he responded by saying, "It's a beautiful house, but I must say, it takes on a completely different feeling at night. It's not such a nice place after it gets dark." We returned to work there a couple more times on smaller jobs, but as the clients were living there full time by then, we didn't spend much time in the actual house itself. But on one occasion, we were in the kitchen in the evening, having a cup of tea with the owner, when from the back room there was a huge crash, like a wardrobe being pushed over. The owner just put his finger up and whispered, "Please pretend you didn't hear that. We don't want the children to be scared." We do a lot of work on repossessed houses, no pun intended, and houses going through probate. So we visited a lot of empty properties, often while the owner has recently died. And I've never, in over 10 years, been creeped out by a place like I was there.
So, I'm new here, but wanted to post these stories I have about my 70-plus-year-old family home. I still currently live in my family home. I've been living back here for the past 3 years. My grandpa, nan, and father all passed away inside the house, so there's history here. The first time I experienced something in this house was quite a few years ago. I was with my friends and we were playing a prank on another friend who was sleeping at the time. We were going to barge into the room he was sleeping in and wave sparklers in his face and make a lot of noise to wake him up. I decided to film this and share it with my other friends. When I looked back at the footage the next day, while we were preparing to barge into the room, we were trying to be quiet not to wake him. There was a very clear voice in the video that didn't belong to anyone there. It had a very strong accent and said, "Get out of my way." None of us had heard it in the moment, only in the video. Another time I experienced something in the house was when I was having an argument with my girlfriend. Mid-sentence, all the taps in the house turned on at the same time. Now, this could be due to faulty plumbing, but it scared the crap out of us both enough to make us stop arguing. Not too sure if this is paranormal or not. I have been touched by something on my neck while I was washing dishes. I was home alone washing dishes late one night and felt a cold, almost wet stroke on the back of my neck. It made the hairs on my neck stand up and sent tingles down my arms. But now we get to the interesting stuff. So, because the house is very old, we have had it renovated and now the activity has multiplied. Just last night, I heard someone walking down my hallway and stop outside my bedroom. No one was home, just me. Doors are open when I know I've shut them, and doors are closed when I know I've left them open. But the weirdest one has only started the last few nights. When I'm in bed at night, I hear someone walking on my roof. Not an animal, like human steps. I've rushed outside with a torch to check, thinking there was something or someone actually on my roof, but nothing. It has happened every night at around midnight without fail. Just someone on my roof. I'm sure I'm forgetting some stuff over the years, but this house is definitely haunted. But I don't feel unsafe. I feel as if my family are making it known that they are here with me still.
This house was unlike anything I'd ever lived in, since I had grown up in the city my whole life. This whole idea of living on a farm was something that really interested me. Now, we weren't actually farmers. We would just live on the property and the farmers would tend to their land surrounding the property lines of the house. The driveway was off of the highway, about a mile away from town, and the driveway was a gravel road which was 1/3 of a mile long. As we were driving towards the new house, I noticed the grove that surrounded the property had a dark feel to it. For those who don't know what a grove is, think of a small forest. I started to sweat and my stomach dropped as soon as we were now in front of the house. I immediately had gotten goosebumps and wasn't really sure what was going on, especially since I hadn't felt like this in a very long time. In the vehicle, it was my stepdad, my mum, my brother, my sister, and me. Everyone but my sister and I were excited to finally be here. We all got out of the vehicle to go and explore. The property was massive compared to that of a normal city property, and what I noticed is that it had seemed a little weird being as isolated as it was. Even the grove had no signs of wildlife, not even birds chirping, which really puts me in a very uncomfortable mood because it was too quiet. My mum and stepdad insisted that we all go inside together as a family to check it out and see the inside of the house finally. There were 2 entrances to the house, one of which was the main entrance, and another entrance which, when you came through that way, led into the kitchen. For whatever reason, we entered in through the kitchen entrance, and I absolutely lost it mentally when I stepped inside and felt the negative energy. I had to keep it together though because I wanted to see what it was like and to give it a shot, as one could say. The kitchen was fairly modernized and wasn't in bad shape, but there was something off about this whole thing. It had felt like Mum and Stepdad were hiding something from us kids. Everything just seemed negative about all of this, and I couldn't pinpoint what it was. After the whole kitchen ordeal, we went into the first living room. I felt like I was vibrating to an extent, almost as if when you feel your phone vibrate in your pocket but your phone isn't there. The vibration was felt through my whole body as a negative vibration, and I was not having it. But I wanted to keep it together and just get going for the sake of it. What I had noticed, however, is that from the kitchen to the first living room, the vibration had increased in negativity and only kept increasing as we went into the second living room. Once that happened, I ran outside onto the deck and started crying. The energy was so dense and so negative. It was so hard for me to handle and keep it together. All I could feel was sadness and despair, anger and malicious intent, and other things I can't explain. My mum and stepdad came outside to ask what was wrong, and I told them that they wouldn't understand. And I also told them that I was not staying here at this house. I told them that this house is nothing but evil. But what's there wasn't going to show themselves right away, because sometimes that is how these spirits work. They tried to give me comfort in saying, if there was evil here, it would have hurt us already. I knew they meant well, but they weren't taking my warning seriously. I told them that we're going to regret ever living here, and with whatever happens, we will never be the same. They both laughed nervously, but told me the same thing over and over, and I eventually calmed down and decided to go inside since the sun was starting to set. The next few weeks were fairly quiet. Nothing too crazy happened. I began to really question myself and wondered if maybe I had overreacted and perhaps I was going crazy. Doors would open and close, orbs and shadows would present themselves. Voices would be heard and footsteps as well. Children's laughter happened every now and again. I would also wake up with scratches in sets of 3s. Sometimes the scratches would cover my entire back and chest. I never told anyone about it, especially not my sister. I didn't want to scare her, and my brother was too young to really connect with at this point. So I kept quiet and kept observing in silence. What I did begin to notice though is that I was the only one who saw these things happening, which made me feel even more uncomfortable because what did that mean for me? Was I supposed to help? Was I supposed to talk back? I never once talked back or asked things out loud to them. What was I supposed to do? Over the next few years, this is how things were. When I was in 10th grade, these experiences began to worsen. To be clear, I did keep a shotgun in my room since I loved to hunt and didn't want anyone else to mess around with my gun. I kept a trigger lock on it and kept my shotgun shells buried in my closet so that everything was spaced out and safe. For some reason though, I lost my keys to my trigger lock, which was extremely odd because I always kept them near me. I didn't think anything of it. One day I was home alone because I enjoyed the peace and quiet when everyone was gone shopping so that I could concentrate on reading books and being mindful. My door wasn't shut all the way, but it wasn't open enough to see through, which is what I liked. I was sitting on the edge of my bed looking through my phone at whatever it was, when suddenly I heard my name being called. Now, I could not figure out whether or not the voice was male or female, and it sounded like it was coming from downstairs. I got up and opened the door, expecting nothing, but then I heard my name called again. But this time, the voice sounded more angry. I shut my door as it was before, and sat back on my bed. I looked out my window and enjoyed the breeze that blew through because it was so fresh and crisp. Then my room began to get colder and colder, and the energy that I had felt from the first day at the house came into my room as well. I thought that maybe the weather outside had gotten colder, but that didn't make any sense at all. It was one of those things where you knew that it didn't make sense, even if you couldn't piece it together correctly in your head. Then I noticed that my door began to open slowly, and there was a shadow there. Once I saw the shadow, I blacked out. Mind you, I have no history of blacking out or anything of the sort. When I woke up, I was sitting in the same spot on my bed, but I noticed that my window was shut and locked, and my door was shut completely. I looked over at my closet and noticed that the door was open, and all of my things were thrown out, and there were shotgun shells everywhere. It was a complete disaster. Then I looked down and something hit my neck. What hit my neck was in fact my shotgun barrel, and I took it out from under me and looked at my shotgun. The trigger lock was off completely, and it was off safety, with one loaded into the chamber. I couldn't believe what was happening, so I put the shotgun on safe, took the shell from the barrel, put the trigger lock back on, and cleaned up my room. I put the keys for the trigger lock on top of my dresser and went downstairs to get some water and went outside to clear my head. When I had come back inside, I went upstairs and looked at my dresser and noticed that the keys were gone. I'll be honest, that's all I'm going to write for now because I have goosebumps and I am honestly scared again. I don't mean to chick it out, but I did want to share at least this much with you guys. It still freaks me out at almost 22 years old. I can't believe it. To be continued. Hello watchers and listeners. Happy Halloween and thank you so much for watching my Halloween special. A huge thank you to all the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories, and also to all the fantastic narrators who helped me put this one together. A link to both the story and also each narrator's channel will be in the description below. Be sure to check them out if you haven't already, because in my opinion they're all amazing. If you have any stories you'd like to share on my channel, please send them to my email, which is also in the description below. Due to the number of videos I put out during Halloween week, there is a chance I may only be doing one video next week. there's a chance I might not too. We'll just have to wait and see. As always, thank you so much for your continued support. I really do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.